and welcome to Day 3 of the Healing from CPTSD course. Today's module will all be about your mind, and more specifically, your vicious inner critic. If you remember the 8 pillars of emotional health and well-being from yesterday's module, today's module will focus on cognitive healing along with self-compassion and inner child work. So the truth is, your mind is really the central command center of your life, and because you have been through intense trauma and toxic conditioning in your life in one form or another, the mind must be taken back first. As mentioned in the previous module, this is only possible to do 100% when you are in a safe place. Because if you are not in a safe place, your inner guards and defense mechanisms will be up and will prevent you from being able to access all of the traumatic stuff that you've been carrying around in your mind. So far, if you really want to take your life back from CPTSD, step 1 is to get yourself to a safe place ASAP, and step 2 is to take your mind back. As stated, even if you can't get to a completely safe place at this point in your life, you can still work on your healing and personal empowerment as you figure out a way to get yourself to a safe place. To start, you've got to think of your mind as sort of like a computer that has all kinds of malware on it from all of the narcissistic abuse, irrational conditioning, and toxicity you've been exposed to. The vicious inner critic is a large part of this malware and conditioning of your brain and mind, and that is why it is one of the key fundamental areas to address when trying to heal from CPTSD. You have got to take your mind back. Your abuser has conditioned you to feel as if you have no power. They've conditioned you to self-sabotage with your own mind and thoughts, even when the abuser isn't around, and they've also conditioned you to repeatedly focus on what you don't want in your life rather than what you do want. So, to take your mind back from all the conditioning that it's been through, we've got to identify the faulty and irrational mental programs in the form of thoughts that run through your mind on a regular basis, learn how to counter them with rational, healthy, loving thoughts, and to also learn to focus your mind a bit on those things you do want rather than on what you don't want. The power of your mind and your mental focus is your primary tool for taking your life back and taking it wherever you'd like it to go. So where do we begin? We start with the basics. Because you have been abused emotionally and psychologically and felt that you weren't loved and weren't worthy of love and safety, you've got to start to love yourself. This is the easiest and fastest way to take your mind back from the vicious inner critic and your tendency to self-sabotage and to continue to hate, reject, and abuse yourself. The narcissist has abused you, beat you down, and has acted like something of a tyrant in your life. The vicious inner critic that you have in your mind is really the narcissist that has put themselves in your own mind to continue to abuse you and sabotage you even when they aren't around. It's horrible and insidious, I know. So, our vicious inner critic constantly tells us things like we aren't good enough, we'll never make it, we're doomed to live a life of pain and suffering, no one likes us, we aren't worthy of love, etc. Our inner critic actually continues to beat us down mentally and emotionally all through our lives. Maybe you feel weak, afraid, and powerless against both the narcissist and the inner critic, but the truth is you are far more powerful than you know. And so to stop the inner critic, you've got to start telling it no when it starts to act up or whisper negative, irrational fears to you in your own mind. Now, because there is so much subconscious conditioning from the narcissist, your inner critic is largely operating in your subconscious. Because of this, you may not hear the inner critic in your mind as if someone was talking to you, but you will feel the inner critic's thoughts by the way you feel in certain situations. Honestly, you'd be amazed at how much of your general fear and anxiety is caused just by the inner critic itself, constantly feeding you lies and making you feel terrible. Stopping the inner critic alone will make you feel so much better. So let's start with some real-world examples of your inner critic kicking in with its irrational thoughts, fears, and lies to you about yourself. Let's say you're in a social situation and your anxiety is through the roof. Maybe your inner critic is saying things to you like, you're so lame, you're a loser, nobody likes you, these people think you're a joke, etc. Now again, you may not hear this in your mind as a direct voice, but you will feel these thoughts within you in the form of anxiety, fear, shame, and self-loathing. The truth is, we often project what our inner critic is telling us in our own minds onto others, and we believe that certain people don't like us and think we are horrible, unlikable, or unlovable because of how horrible we believe we are. Maybe you're out with some friends or at a work lunch outing and you accidentally spill something on yourself. Dealing with CPTSD, this can very well trigger something of an emotional flashback within you, causing you overwhelming feelings of shame, guilt, and fear. At this point, your inner critic might kick in and tell you how clumsy or stupid you are, and how all of these people are now judging you and laughing at you. In reality, many of your friends or people that you're there with may not be thinking any of these things at all, because in reality, everyone makes mistakes. It's really the inner critic at work in your own mind that is making you feel anxious and terrible, along with having you believe all kinds of things that simply aren't based in fact, truth, or history. When dealing with CPTSD and codependency, or what some refer to as self-love deficiency disorder, we have a tendency to constantly feel that we are fundamentally flawed and that everything is always our fault. If you notice, narcissists never think that anything is their fault, and for those of us on the other end of the spectrum, or more codependent, we have a tendency to think that everything is our fault because of how bad and worthless we believe ourselves to be. Now, getting a hold of your own inner critic and reversing its irrational and toxic thoughts might seem too complicated or even overwhelming. And while it will take some time of repeated effort to get the hang of noticing the inner critic and then countering it with rational, loving, compassionate thoughts for yourself, the truth is this process can be simplified a great deal so you can start putting this into practice right away. Honestly, this is where inner child work comes into play nicely. You see, while you might have trouble loving yourself and thinking highly of yourself, if you were to imagine your inner self as an abused, broken, and absolutely terrified inner child, and that you are a strong, healthy, loving inner parent, be it a mother or a father figure, you can give your damaged, terrified, and abused inner child the love, comfort, and feeling of love and safety it so desperately needs. Imagine your child is terrified of a monster in their closet at night and is having all kinds of irrational fears and thoughts about what might be in their closet. Then imagine that you come into their room as a rational, compassionate, loving parent to soothe the child and make them feel loved and comforted, and at the same time help alleviate their irrational fears and anxieties by turning on the light and showing them that there is no monster in their closet. You can use this powerful analogy with yourself in every situation where you are feeling afraid, anxious, worried, and when you're coming down too hard on yourself. Most of the time, we are worried about shadows in our closet that are simply irrational fears, and we just need to start practicing having rational thoughts with ourselves about our fears, along with practicing self-love and self-soothing to make these fears subside. The inner critic is fundamentally telling you you are horrible and unworthy of love, and is thus not giving you love. To counter it, you simply got to practice self-love and self-compassion with yourself at the level of your own thoughts. We must learn how to start comforting and loving ourselves on all levels, but when dealing with the inner critic, we simply must start to do this with our thoughts. A terrified child who feels alone and afraid just wants to feel safe and loved. And what do healthy, loving parents do with their children when they're feeling scared, unsafe, and unloved? Many times the parent gives the child a big hug to make them feel a sense of safety. Maybe they rock them a bit and soothe them by saying things like, "Shh, it's okay, everything's okay," and after some time the child feels much better. The child feels much better because they feel a sense of safety and love from their parent who keeps them safe and gives them love and support. Because many of us didn't get that with our narcissist or even narcissistic parents, we simply must learn how to give ourselves a sense of safety and warmth with love and self-compassion. And again, the easiest way to do this is to start speaking to yourself in your mind as you would a loving and caring parent telling their scared and lonely child that everything is okay and that there are no monsters in the closet, so to speak. The nice thing is, once we start to learn to love ourselves and make ourselves feel safe and that everything's okay, the less it will matter what other people are thinking, whether they are really thinking something negative about us or not. When we learn to stop rejecting ourselves and our own thoughts and minds and to make ourselves feel safe, loved, and that everything's okay by not rejecting ourselves, it really won't matter whether people reject us or not anymore, because we will have learned how to stop rejecting ourselves by learning to love ourselves. And with that, we will conclude today's module with a simple exercise for today. So the simple exercise for today will be to start the process of trying to take a look at your inner thoughts in the form of your inner critic when you're having them, and to try to start to reverse these negative and irrational thoughts with loving, rational, and self-compassionate thoughts. I know this might seem overwhelming, but you don't have to worry about getting this perfect right now or of trying to watch every single thought you have. Just begin to take baby steps and at least trying to make yourself feel that you are safe, loved, and that everything is okay. I would highly recommend trying to implement some inner child work here. Start by seeing your anxious and terrified inner self as an actual anxious and terrified child, and simply work to comfort your inner child the way you would with an actual child who is scared and anxious. Use your breath to breathe in and out slowly and rhythmically whenever you're feeling bad or anxious, and practice telling yourself that you are okay and that everything is going to be okay. Simply comfort yourself the way you would with a scared and lonely child, but do this with yourself in your own thoughts and mind. Your mantra should be, it's okay, it's okay, sweetheart, everything is okay and is going to be okay. So that's step one, learning to soothe, love yourself, and to make yourself feel that everything is safe and okay. Step two is to start to notice your irrational thoughts about yourself and others, stop them, and then counter them. As stated previously, you may not hear these critical thoughts in your mind, but you can easily notice them running in your mind by the way you feel in any given situation. The easy way to identify irrational thoughts is when you feel bad, anxious, worried, or confused, you are actually having irrational thoughts running in your mind. Rational and healthy thoughts are thoughts that make you feel good, safe, and that everything is okay. In other words, you've got to start practicing having thoughts that make you feel good and stopping those thoughts that make you feel bad. Just like the parent comforting the child's irrational thoughts about a monster being in their closet by showing them that there is no monster in their closet, give yourself the rational, loving, supportive inner dialogue in your own thoughts that a safe, healthy, protective, and loving parent would give to their child. Just start out by trying to notice the correlation between your thoughts and your feelings in any given moment, and trying to reverse negative thoughts and feelings to rational and loving, compassionate thoughts with yourself. In a later module, you will be shown a unique and powerful technique for being able to unwind your mind's tendency to have irrational and negative thoughts, and then to reverse them to more loving and compassionate thoughts so that you can see and, more importantly, feel the difference. When your brain's wiring and conditioning starts to experience the good feelings of loving and rational thoughts, it will become much easier to do this throughout your daily activities when something happens to cause you to feel a sense of unease and anxiety. Learn to start comforting and loving yourself. I hope you enjoyed today's module, and I will see you in tomorrow's module.